Let's look back on what was a momentous week. We are waiting for the House to vote on the stimulus package. It's a single package now, and the Senate is expected to vote later today. Joining us, as he does periodically, we're always pleased to welcome for a power lunch news conference of sorts, Senator Robert Menendez, the Democratic senator from the Garden State of New Jersey. He's on Capitol Hill. Senator, always good to see you, sir. Welcome back.
Great to be back with all of you.
When do we start to see the impact of the stimulus bill in the economy, do you think? And where?
Yeah, well, I certainly hope confidence right away when we pass it in one respect. And then in terms of actual output, I think we're looking at the beginning of probably 90 days in which that money begins to flow out in different elements of it, from the transportation side, from the Clean Energy Renewable Authority Fund that will invest $29 billion but creates another $100 billion in private sector investment. And then moving on from there in some of the other elements, of course, the tax package that has $230 billion worth of tax cuts. 95% of all workers will get a tax cut in this package, as well as some of the critical business taxes that we included in it.
Yesterday, when the president was in Illinois, he was at that Caterpillar factory, and Caterpillar made much of the fact that they would take back some of the layoffs they had announced as a result of this stimulus package. Have you heard of any other companies saying the same thing?
Well, I've talked to some New Jersey companies who have said to me, well, if this package rolls out in a reasonable period of time, number one is we won't lay off people. And number two, particularly in the energy fields where we have solar industry, we're the second largest producer of solar panels and equipment, the LED lighting industry that's creating 2 manufacturing plants in New Jersey that have provisions in this bill that will actually create jobs.
Senator, when we're bailing out Wall Street, we want to cap their salaries and have all kind of punitive measures, and we've attached strings to a whole bunch of other things. For states that receive federal money, for companies that receive federal money under stimulus, should we be having some kind of caps on what they earn and what they are paid, things like that?
For the companies, you said?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that there have to be some limits at the end of the day. You can't have $20 billion worth of bonuses and have the confidence of the American taxpayer giving billions of dollars to a bank or financial institution and see that. I know about retaining quality and individuals of competence, but by the same time, we're talking about a marketplace that continuously loses jobs. And so the average American doesn't fully understand how it is when they're losing their job that you have to pay $20 billion in bonuses at the end of the day.
So you're going to cap the salary of a construction firm, of his CEO?
Well, the reality is we're not giving them money directly as we are infusing capital in banks. What we are giving them is an opportunity to have a job done that will create jobs in the economy and that will create a demand for goods and services that will flow from that job site. So that's a whole different set of circumstances.
Senator, so do you support what is actually in what we understand to be in the bill right now? Because Senator Harry Reid came out on Monday and said he didn't think executive compensation was going to stick around in the final bill. But now, according to reports and looking over what you guys have been passing around, it looks like it's even more strict. Like Congress figured out what restrictive stock bonuses mean, and they've gotten even tougher. And I got an email from a CEO today who says he thinks he'll lose a big chunk of his management if what you guys have written so far actually gets approved. Are you going to vote for this? Do you support this strict a measure when it comes to executive compensation?
Well, look, I support this bill. If we do not move this bill, we will see an economy that will be in a downward spiral, will create greater deflationary pressures than we have today, and that's going to hurt everybody. And then the question of who has a job and who has confidence in investors and consumers is going to be a huge challenge. I just simply think that at the end of the day, are there not reasonable limitations when viability is at stake? Or is it so important to keep the culture of Wall Street in such a way that viability comes second? At the end of the day, you have to have a company and you have to have a job to go to. And I think there are some reasonable conditions that can be imposed when huge amounts of capital are being infused into a company.
Senator, if I could turn you to some of the events of earlier this week and also today, as it pertains to President Obama, not only as commander-in-chief, but basically as the CEO of the country right now. And, Mr. Geithner with his plan released earlier this week. It was not well received by many on Wall Street and by some in other quarters of the country. And in addition to that, now the latest issues with the Commerce Department, there are some who are saying that there have been a number of key stumbles and that they're losing a little confidence in President Obama's role as CEO of the country. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I think President Obama has acted both expeditiously. He's got a cabinet together quicker than probably any president we have seen in the last quarter century. You know, Judd Gregg is not an example of someone who changes his mind that you can hold the president responsible for. They had long conversations about what the job would be like, and Senator Gregg decided ultimately that he wanted to be his own man and not respond to anybody. I appreciate that. I understand that. But I guess he should have thought about that before. And on the Geithner presentation, you know, I've been critical at it at the banking hearing, but not because of its context. It's for its lack of context. And if I have a criticism, I would have just said, wait until you have the meat on the bones to make your presentation instead of giving us broad outlines.
I mean, what would you like to see in that bill, in that bailout? What's missing right now?
Well, in terms of the financial rescue plan for the financial institutions, I think you have to decide how you're going to deal with the illiquid assets and figure out, you know, some have suggested the equivalent of a bank that consumes it. Others have suggested, you know, the financing. I personally would like it to see in the institutions would find a mechanism that ultimately helps them liquefy that. It is about mortgage mitigation and stopping the foreclosure crisis. It is about infusing capital in banks, but with the appropriate conditionality to ensure that we liquefy the lending crisis.
With all due respect, those are all the goals that we've all been talking about now for a year. I mean, weren't you disappointed to see the Treasury Secretary come out and essentially reiterate the goals but never answer the how? That's the same. All those questions you've asked are what we've been asking for a year now.
Well, in fairness to the Secretary, you know, one thing is a year. That was the previous administration, and I certainly didn't care for the way...
He was at the New York Fed the whole time.
Well, he was the head of the New York Fed, but he's not the head of the Treasury Department with the full powers of the Treasury Department and the Treasury Secretary. So he's only been on the job a couple of weeks. This is an enormous challenge. All of us want instantaneous gratification, but getting this right is equally as important. And my criticism is not that, you know, he didn't have... my criticism is that he came out early before he had his plan fully on board. And this is a very complicated, particularly on the illiquid asset issue, it's a very complicated process. So it seems to me you need to get what it is that you intend to do, bring out a plan that is comprehensive, that is bold, that is well thought out, and that would produce the confidence necessary.
We have to run, Senator, but very quickly. But has his coming out too early with too little detail damaged the administration's credibility with the banking sector and with Wall Street?
I think at the end of the day, when they put their plan out, we'll see ultimately a rise in the confidence of Wall Street and the financial sector. These are unprecedented challenges, unprecedented times. I think that we'll find a plan that we're all going to have confidence in, and that will turn the market around.
Senator Menendez, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time,
sir. Good to be with all of you.
Robert Menendez of New Jersey. Let's